Welcome to the deep dive. You know our mission here. We take the most densely packed, sometimes, frankly, terrifying sources,
Yeah.
and we distill the core knowledge. We try to give you that shortcut to being instantly well-informed.
And today's source? Well, it definitely fits the terrifying description.
Yeah, today, we are not just analyzing history. We are entering a zone of, well, absolute contradiction, really. We are diving into the Tenebrous Chronicle of Lysandra Vane.
The pretty infamous text, even in esoteric circles.
It is. And for those unfamiliar, this text is a hand-copied document. It dates from the mid-19th century, but it claims to be the precise, unholy confession of a 17th-century noblewoman.
Lysandra Vane,
Yeah.
from 1605 specifically.
Exactly. And this woman, Lysandra Vane, allegedly achieved something, well, truly radical. She orchestrated a series of calculated murders and rituals that, according to the source, successfully tore the cosmic veil, fundamentally shattered the structure of reality itself.
It's a huge claim, a reality-altering event.
It really is. So our job over the next 30, maybe 40 minutes is to map the architecture of this alleged treason. We need to understand its mechanism, its philosophy, and its enduring effects, if any.
Yeah, we need to try and figure out, is this chronicle just the most meticulous piece of Gothic fiction ever conceived?
Yeah.
Or are we actually looking at the genuine blueprint of what it calls a cosmic treason?
And that distinction is, it's everything, isn't it? Because historians are completely split on this.
Oh, profoundly divided.
Yeah.
When they approach this source, you basically get two camps immediately. Camp 1 says, it's an incredibly elaborate early 17th century literary fabrication, maybe built around a real family tragedy, in Essex.
Plausible enough, given the era and genre.
Right. But Camp 2,
Oh.
well, Camp 2 takes the text at its word. That this is the factual record of an event that fundamentally altered cosmic law, introducing effectively a regime of chaos.
The implications there are staggering. It changes how you view, well, everything after 1605.
Exactly. The implications for how we view the history of the 17th century and beyond are quite literally universal if you take it seriously.
Okay, so to begin unpacking this chronicle, let's start with something crucial and frankly alarming that we pulled from the notes left by the copyists, the scriveners. Something the source itself calls the physical threat. This isn't just some dusty old book we're talking about.
Not at all. Not even close. The very existence of the physical document is presented as terrifying in itself. This manuscript, the copy we have access to, was recovered long after the events it supposedly details.
When was that? Post-WWII?
Yeah, post-Second World War. Found in a sealed trunk, bizarrely enough, in an abandoned farmhouse out in Fallowmere. But the original scrivener, the person who actually made this 19th century copy, left this incredible chilling caution, a warning about the text's purpose.
Right. They concluded that Baroness Vane, the author, designed this document not just as a record of her life, her confession, but as a deliberate vessel.
Yes, a vessel intended to contain and actively channel the corrupted power of the Liber Azerate. That's the so-called anti-gospel vein supposedly used to achieve her goals.
So the book itself is meant to be dangerous, like radioactive.
Pretty much, it suggests the text is an active, malicious object, almost like a form of technological evil, maybe? The ink, the paper, the binding, they're all described as being charged, imbued.
They're the physical repository of her disruptive power, then. Bound by ritual, designed to function as a kind of spiritual anchor for the treason she enacted centuries ago.
That's the claim. The narrative itself is presented as a trap laid across time.
Okay, wow. That immediately changes how you approach reading it, doesn't it? It shifts the discussion from, standard historical analysis into something more like carefully dismantling a functional malignant machine.
Precisely. You handle it differently.
Yeah.
And this concern, this idea of it being an active threat, it's immediately reinforced by the manuscript's opening. There's this formal caution written by the unfortunate clerk who first cataloged this document.
Unfortunate is probably the right word.
Probably. And it reads less like a standard archival note, item 3B, and more like a detailed warning against exposure to some kind of, biological or spiritual hazard.
It's intense, isn't it? The Scriveners addresses the future reader directly. They recognize you hold a thing cursed and condemned.
Yeah, and they explicitly state that by even handling it, the reader trespasses on the chart of the adversary's hand. They're not worried about someone stealing it. They're worried about spiritual infection.
It's a whole different level of concern.
What's fascinating here, though, if you try to step back from the sheer Gothic terror of the language, is the profound effort that went into containing the document. The Scriveners detailed these extreme, almost ritualistic binding methods they encountered. They emphasize that they had to forcibly retrieve it from where it had been interred, buried almost.
Right, it wasn't just sitting on a shelf. It had been secreted away, hidden inside the structure of a building, specifically found within cold, damp brick walls, wasn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which implies whoever possessed it last really understood its danger. They tried to treat it like, I don't know, radioactive waste, attempting to entomb it permanently within the Earth's insulating mass, hoping it would just stay put.
And the bindings themselves? They weren't normal?
No, highly specific and just loaded with dark symbolism. The manuscript is encased in hide, first described chillingly as a gray and dreadful shell.
Yeah.
But the security measures, they really speak volumes about the nature of the malice supposedly contained within.
It wasn't chain or iron locks, which you might expect. It was bound by 7 knots.
7 knots, yes.
Yeah.
And not just any knots. The text is very specific. 7 knots of hardened human sinews.
Oh, sinews, tendons.
Exactly. And that detail is just, it's deeply symbolic, isn't it?
Yeah.
And really important for understanding the ritualistic mindset here. Sinews, tendons, they represent the binding force of the flesh, the very energy that gives life form and structure.
So by binding the document with human sinews, what was the intent? To bind its power using life itself?
That seems to be the idea. To bind the natural world, the physical existence Lysandra Vane apparently hated, to the unnatural destructive power contained within the ink. It's like a spell in itself, securing the physical deed, maybe, using the body's own binding agent against itself.
Chilling. And the final physical components, there was a clasp, wasn't there? And a seal.
Yes, a heavy brass clasp, which suggests physical security was still a concern, and then a seal made of cold black wax. Again, it speaks to this profound, organized attempt to keep this knowledge contained, maybe even hoping that the strength of the flesh used in the binding would eventually decay before anyone discovered it, a kind of grim time lock.
And the seal itself. This is where we get our first real glimpse into the, let's say, calculated nature of Vane's alleged treason. It wasn't a family crest or a signet ring impression.
No, the scrivener describes it as an abhorrent mark, and they identified it as a 7-pointed snare. But critically, the scrivener calls this specific star a geometric lie, known only to those who hate the true.
Okay, let's pause on that phrase. The geometric lie. That sounds significant. What exactly does that mean, either in the context of 17th century occult knowledge, or maybe more importantly, within the Chronicle's own internal logic?
Right. Well, if we look at the philosophy Lysandra Vane was supposedly pursuing, she saw creation, the physical universe, as based on flawed, weak mathematics, like a failed structure. In classical occultism, and even in early modern philosophy, patterns like the circle, the triangle, the 5-pointed star, the pentagram, they often represent divine or natural order, balance, the human form, elements.
Things that are stable, structured.
Exactly. But the 7-pointed star, the septagram or heptagram, it's often a figure of asymmetry, transmutation, maybe instability, doesn't tessellate perfectly, for instance. By calling it a geometric lie, the Chronicle seems to imply that Vane found or used a structural pattern that actively negates or destabilizes the universal geometric laws that supposedly underpin reality itself.
So it's like an anti-formula, a mathematical symbol for chaos or uncreation.
Precisely. Her goal wasn't worship or sacrifice in the traditional sense, not really devotion to some adversary as a personality. It seems to have been intellectual, a kind of calculated, blasphemous physics designed to tear the framework, mathematical negation.
Which makes sense of the warnings, then. They're not just superstitious fears, they're like operating instructions for handling dangerous code.
That's a great way to put it.
Right.
And this geometric structural nature is why the warnings issued to the reader are so precise. What we flagged as the 3 specific rules. They seem designed to prevent specific types of structural corruption in the reader.
Okay, what's the first rule?
The first rule targets sound and language itself. Do not speak the titles aloud. The scriveners caution that the key phrases and titles within this chronicle aren't just metaphors. They are, quote, precise instruments of corruption.
Precise instruments, so the words themselves do something.
That's the implication. If language, when spoken, carries a specific vibrational or structural weight, then Vane's titles, the names she apparently ascribed to the voids, the laws of severance she discovered they act like vectors. Speaking them aloud completes some kind of circuit, achieves a localized invocation. The words aren't just about the treason, they are the treason, enacted on a small scale.
Wow. Okay, rule number 2.
The second warning targets vulnerability, specifically solitude and darkness. Do not read this work alone in the dark. The text is chillingly explicit here. It claims Lysandra Vane's spirit is parasitic. and that it actively seeks quiet solitude, specifically for the exchange of souls.
An exchange, like a transaction?
Exactly. It's a transactional warning. It's not just suggesting, a ghost might pop out and spook you. It's saying the document itself or the entity tied to it is actively hunting for a private, vulnerable moment with you to perform calculated trade. Your living soul for her, quote, eternal place in the chaos. It gives the manuscript an agenda, agency.
That is deeply disturbing. Okay, and the final rule. This one sounds like the kicker.
It is. It collapses the fourth wall entirely. Know that every act of reading is an act of invocation. Full stop.
Every act, just reading it silently.
That's the claim. The scrivener warns that the reader risks not only their sanity, which, fair enough, maybe, but the eternal, living part of your soul to this bareness of chaos. Now, we have to remember, in the 19th century when this copy was made, there was this huge resurgence in occult literature being framed as dangerous active texts. Think spiritualism, theosophy.
Right, the idea of dangerous knowledge was definitely in the air.
Absolutely. But even for that time, this warning is extreme. It posits that the act of comprehension itself, the processing of the information, somehow feeds the original ritual, that your understanding empowers her.
And the text itself leans into this, doesn't it? In the prologue, it claims Lysandra Vane's spirit is unbound and ever cold and is now literally bound to the leaves, the pages.
Yeah, it says to read is to invite her parasitic grace and effectively trade your living soul for a place within the wrathful chaos. So, it's a hell of a mission statement for a source document. It basically dares you to proceed, knowing the alleged cost.
Okay, so if we're going to understand the chilling logic behind Lysandra Vane, her motivations, we need to look beyond the scary book itself and delve into her origins, the environment that supposedly forged this extreme nihilism.
Exactly. You can't understand the end point without the beginning. And the Chronicle dedicates extensive, highly descriptive passages to setting the stage at Aethelred Hall. That's the Vane family estate. It presents it not just as a house, but as this monstrous embodiment of failure and decay.
So we're moving into the architecture of despair here. Our third key takeaway. Aethelred Hall's corrupt geometry. What was this place like?
Well, geographically, it was built over the notoriously damp, brackish Essex bogs. Late Tudor style, apparently. A monstrous edifice of black stone and a heavy brick. So right away, the environment itself is the first teacher. Instability, decay, damp.
And there was some weird folklore about the foundations, wasn't there? Something about bleeding out.
Yes. That's such a disturbing detail.
Ah.
Local lore claimed the ancient base, the oldest part of the hall, wasn't built on solid stone, but on soil demanded by terrible old deeds, and that the very ground it stood on was built on bleeding out.
Bleeding out? What does that even imply? That the land itself was sacrificed?
That seems to be the sense, like the ground itself had been wounded or paid for with blood, maybe demanded by some prior cosmic or spiritual debt. It suggests the structure was inherently unstable from the very beginning, a captive to the land, rather than a masterwork of human construction dominating it.
And the inside, was it grand? Opulent?
Grand, maybe, but oppressive. The Chronicle describes it as a shrine of petrified night, a place of magnificent gloom where shadows absolutely choke the light. Think less stately home, more mausoleum.
So dark, damp.
Yeah.
Any other sensory details?
Oh, yeah. The light that did get in was described as sickly, pale, poor. But what really sticks with you are the smells and textures. The air was thick with mildew, dust, and this detail is remarkable. A metallic, cold scent of rot and failing trust.
Metallic, like iron or sulfur.
Could be. Both often linked to occult activity, right?
Mm.
But here it just permeates the environment, suggesting the house itself was poisoned, chemically or spiritually, from the ground up. The failing trust part adds that psychological layer, too.
And this house represented the Vane family history, their inherited failure.
Absolutely. The hall was a monument of failure. Its tapestries apparently didn't show glorious victories, but the family's doom in the civil wars, ambitions unfulfilled, courage that was ultimately futile, vain in both senses. The generations before Lysandra supposedly succumbed to this profound melancholy, this quiet despair seeking forbidden truth in silence as their fortunes just dwindled away.
A dynasty in decline, living in a house saturated with failure.
Exactly. And Lysandra Vane, born in 1665, was presented as the ultimate product of this decay. The Chronicle calls her the unnatural bloom. It even notes she was born beneath a hidden moon, implying a birth outside the natural, visible cycle of the cosmos, already marked as different.
And her entry into the world? It wasn't normal either.
No. The source states she entered the world not with a cry of life, but with a cold, vast lack, a kind of emptiness that was immediately reflected in her eyes.
What did she look like, does it say?
It does. Her physical description is quite unsettling. Her beauty was tragically embossed, it says, with glacial blue sight, cold eyes, and hair that was a striking blend of black silk and metallic ginger thread.
Metallic again, like the scent of the house.
Exactly. It's like the house's corruption was literally woven into her being. The blending of the refined noble line, black silk, with the corrupt, chaotic metallic element.
And her personality, was she just gloomy like her ancestors?
It seems to have been much more than that. The Chronicle emphasizes her disposition wasn't merely sadness or even typical Gothic melancholy. It was more like a pre-philosophical, objective rejection of the world around her. She found no comfort in human society, or even in the grand, gloomy architecture of the hall itself.
So where did she find comfort, if anywhere?
Only out in the marshes, the brackish pools and mud. The text explicitly states that the bogs that drove out men did recognize her soul. It's like she had an affinity for the decay.
So she spent her childhood out there, learning from the landscape.
Pretty much. Studying not scripture or literature, apparently, but the natural cycle of decay through direct observation.
And this is where she got her first big lesson in nihilism.
Yes, according to the Chronicle. By observing the local folk, she watched their useless, frantic effort, the farmers, the fishermen, constantly battling the tides, building these frail seawalls, maintaining their pride in their work.
But she saw it differently.
She saw it with cold certainty. She knew the sea would inevitably claim their walls, their homes, their pride. All that effort was temporal, frail, and ultimately unsound, doomed from the start.
So the marshes proved to her that all human effort, maybe all cosmic structure, was fundamentally meaningless, because decay and dissolution were the only guaranteed endpoints.
That's the core of it. It established her, apparently by her early teens, as this unnatural bloom who was already seeking the final truth that tore the world apart. She wasn't just reacting to her environment. She was actively formulating a philosophy based on it, preparing her mind for, well, for treason against existence itself.
Okay, so the environment, Aethelred Hall and the marshes, supplied the philosophy, this deep-seated nihilism. But philosophy isn't action. Lysandra needed opportunity, she needed means, and, it seems, she needed a final psychological trigger to commit fully to what the Chronicle calls her supreme design.
Absolutely. Philosophy needs tools and a catalyst. And the first critical step she took was purely strategic, almost cold-bloodedly practical, the transaction of marriage.
Right, she needed the Vane title, the family gold, but maybe most importantly, she needed the solitude and unrestricted access to the hall's, let's say, hidden depths, its libraries, its secrets.
Exactly. Her marriage to Baron Lucius Vane was entirely transactional. Zero affection mentioned. Lucius Vane was portrayed as a sort of bluff, conventional soldier, preoccupied with the ongoing wars, probably viewed the decaying hall as nothing more than a tedious family asset he had to manage.
So what did each of them get out of it?
Well, he needed someone to manage the estate and, crucially, provide an heir to continue the failing line. She needed, quote, solitary peace and the keys, essentially, to the estate's libraries and potentially hidden chambers. The Chronicle is very clear. She took the marriage vow with frightening control, seeing the Baron purely as a disposable pawn who would grant her control over the domain.
And how long did this marriage actually last in practice?
Barely any time at all.
Mm-hmm.
The text says 1 fleeting week before he found her marble cold. And it's apparently left. She was left standing like carved in stone. It seems the physical relationship, or lack thereof, was immediately repellent to him, which only reinforced her detachment.
So she just went off to war.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Departed to fight what the Chronicle dismissively calls the vain, pathetic war. His grand departure with sword and plume and all that is framed as simply the passing of the final mortal lord from her sphere. His leaving cleared the stage for her cosmic crime, gave her the absolute solitude she needed.
Convenient for a plan, certainly, but solitude and access aren't enough, right? There needed to be that final push, that turning point, and the Chronicle identifies that as the pregnancy and the subsequent stillbirth. This seems absolutely central.
It is. We really have to analyze this trauma, which the Chronicle vividly calls the stillness of the cradle. This seems to be the core psychological catalyst.
How does she view the pregnancy itself? Does she want a child?
Not according to this text. It suggests Lysandra viewed the entire process as a biological sin. A vulnerability of the flesh she was forced to endure purely as a means to an end, securing her command over the hall after the Baron left. She apparently approached it with a scientist's cold eye, completely detached from the life growing within her.
And the birth itself.
When the moment came, the infant arrived with a waxen stillness. The description is incredibly stark. A cold porcelain complete. No breath, no cry, no sign of life whatsoever.
Devastating. But her reaction wasn't grief.
Critically, no, not grief. The Chronicle insists that in that profound, terrible quiet, the final truth she'd been seeking was revealed to her. The perfect, cold, small corpse proved incontrovertibly in her mind that life itself was built upon a cosmic, weak design, a flawed equation that led inevitably to failure, decay, and stillness.
So the stillbirth confirmed her entire worldview. It crystallized all the failures she'd observed in history, in her own family line, in the efforts of the locals against the sea.
Exactly. It didn't bring sadness. It brought pure, objective hate. A focused, intellectual hate directed at the flawed structure of existence itself. A force that now sought to actively defy all structure, all law, all fate. This perfect small corpse became her necessary sign, the physical manifestation of life's flawed premise, the proof she needed to act.
And her response to the infant's body was unconventional, to say the least.
Utterly. A total rejection of mortal convention, of religious comfort. She commanded the infant be buried not with holy words or in consecrated ground, but in the deepest, oldest crypt beneath the hall, among the unbaptized. She essentially consecrated this space by despair, not grace. The stillness of the cradle became her guiding star, a monument built purely to spite the cosmos.
And it was down there, in that crypt, that she found the next piece, the ultimate tool for her rage.
Yes. According to the Chronicle, it was during her visits to this crypt of the unbaptized, this place she dedicated to failure, that she discovered a secret door hidden beneath centuries of dust and grime, and behind that door lay the Liber Azerate.
The anti-gospel. What does the Chronicle say about this book?
It's described with, again, terrifying detail. Bound in serpent hide, it calls it the anti-gospel penned. This book was supposedly the blueprint for Vane's treason, detailing the structural mechanics necessary to achieve what it calls severance.
Severance from what? Cosmic law? Reality?
Pretty much. And this is where we need to get specific about the concepts Lysandra Vane supposedly studied. The Liber Azerate wasn't written in normal human language or even standard occult symbols. It was written in a script of mathematics cruel, detailing the geometric plan that, quote, made all life a fool.
Mathematics cruel. So again, it's this idea of structure, of physics, but used destructively.
Exactly. Unlike traditional occult texts, which might rely heavily on, say, divine or demonic names, rituals of supplication, spirit bargains, that kind of thing, the Liber Azerate apparently demands the reader approach the problem scientifically, or pseudo-scientifically. It spoke of the Tenebrous Fire, some kind of dark energy maybe, and the fundamental law of severance and night. It detailed the ritual means, the steps necessary to shatter the cosmic veil. If creation is an equation, this book supposedly provided the exact negative value needed to nullify it.
And crucially, it specified the energy source required, the key component.
Yes, it detailed the specific key, the flow of life violently shed, which it named the Scarlet Harvest. This wasn't just generic blood magic. It was presented as a highly specific energy component needed for the ritual mechanics.
How did Lysandra react to finding this horrifying instruction manual?
No shock, no moral dread, according to the text. It insists she felt only satisfaction cold. It was the exact cold logic her nihilism had desired all along, a technical solution to what she saw as a fundamental philosophical problem with existence.
So she had the philosophy from her environment, the catalyst from the stillbirth, the blueprint from the Liber Azerate. What was the final requirement?
The location.
The ritual location, yes. And she discovered, conveniently or perhaps inevitably, that Aethelred Hall itself possessed the ultimate site. Beneath the central hearth in the main hall, once the hearthstones were removed, she found this primal altar rock. It was already carved, apparently, with the scores of wicked art, the exact geometric patterns or equations needed. This was the designated place, engineered perhaps long ago, to tear the cosmic weave.
So all the pieces were in place, the philosophy, the trigger, the manual, and the stage.
Right. So with the Liber Azerate in hand, Lysandra basically transitioned. She went from being this philosophical nihilist brooding in the marshes to what the Chronicle calls a cold high priestess. But we need to be really clear about her approach here.
How so?
She viewed this anti-gospel not as faith, not as something to worship, but as blasphemous science. Her motivation was fundamentally intellectual, not devotional in any traditional sense. She wasn't praying to Satan, she was solving an equation.
Exactly. She saw creation as a mistake, a flawed design, and suffering as its inevitable sum total. She essentially traded her own human sorrow, which the text implies was pretty minimal anyway, more cold lack than sadness, for the sheer scope of this nihilistic plan. She focused on working out the cruel equations necessary to break the anti-divine, as the text puts it. Her mind was now detached, sharp, entirely functional towards this one goal.
But to execute this intellectual treason, she couldn't just lock herself away, could she? She needed to operate in the world. She needed cover.
Precisely. Which is why she adopted the mask of propriety. And the Chronicle notes she chose this role with cold and perfect art. She played the part of the gracious, strong widow, always in somber black silk, obviously, using the pity and the inevitable local gossip as her protective shield.
So she managed the estate, dealt with tenants.
Oh yes, meticulously. Managed all the mundane aspects, the leases, the rents, the domestic affairs, all while concealing this simmering cosmic rage. The public performance was flawless, apparently. She even hosted weekly, formal dances in the gilded drawing rooms of Aethelred Hall.
Dances, while planning cosmic treason.
Yes, and the text adds this brilliant, chilling detail. The music, the laughter, the society chatter, it was all just noise to her.
Just noise. Wow.
That phrase, it's so insightful, isn't it? It implies she'd completely transcended or rejected human culture and connection. She managed to use her reputation for coldness, which people mistook for aristocratic high style, to greet these petty guests, as the text calls them, while internally cursing every breath that held a mortal soul.
But this social engagement, these dances, they weren't just for show, were they? They served a purpose for her plan.
A very specific, grim purpose. It allowed her to observe, to mingle, and crucially, to mark her chosen prey.
The prey needed for the scarlet harvest, the fuel for the ritual.
Exactly. She required vital, concentrated life force as fuel. So she created this exclusive Wicked Circle social club, used the beautiful, probably isolated guest wing of the hall as her gruesome laboratory.
What was the lure? How did she attract people?
It was highly specific, targeting a certain type. She promised discussions of libertine philosophy, hints of decadent delight, things that would attract the young, the proud, the vain, people who believed they were seeking subtle, sophisticated sin, maybe pushing boundaries intellectually or socially.
So they thought they were joining an edgy salon, basically.
Pretty much. Ignoring any potential danger because they were focused on their own narcissistic pleasure or intellectual vanity. They were, in the Chronicle's rather harsh view, perfect subjects because their life force was abundant, vibrant, but largely wasted on superficialities. Prime fuel.
And the Chronicle, does it dwell on the murders?
Interestingly, no, not in a gratuitous way. It treats them almost as a technical requirement, a step in the process. The deaths were described as rituals performed in solitude and darkness. The phrase, "the dagger's single kiss," is used, leaving a chilling mark. The blood, the harvest, was drawn with care, described as a measured, perfect flow, like collecting a regent.
So each death wasn't random violence, it was data collection, energy harvesting.
Something like that. Each death was a necessary component, a necessary sum in the geometric plan she was assembling. It wasn't random slaughter, it was precise harvesting to meet the equation's demands. Lysandra Vane's competence in murder is portrayed as clinical. She's called a silent serial soul, who could apparently smile and laugh politely at the dances while managing the abrupt and quiet disappearance of her victims into the marsh mists later. She wasn't a frenzied killer. She was an accountant of life force, meticulously gathering the energy required for the final severance.
Okay, so the Scarlet Harvest provided the fuel. But the ritual needed more than just raw energy, right? It needed an active instrument, something to transmit this geometric anti-formula.
Yes. And this brings us to a truly essential and frankly bizarre mechanism detailed in the Chronicle. Our fourth key nugget, the viola da gamba and the 11-fold current.
A musical instrument, a viola.
A viola da gamba, yes. A complex 6- or sometimes 7-stringed instrument, quite popular in the 17th century. Known for its deep, resonant tones and its ability to play complex polyphony, multiple melodic lines at once.
Okay, but she wasn't playing like Dowland or Purcell, presumably.
Definitely not. This is the bizarre stroke of genius or madness that really distinguishes Vane's alleged treason from typical Gothic horror tropes. The final key to breaking the world structure wasn't a spell or a sacrifice in the usual sense, but dissonance, music that was deliberately anti-divine.
So what was she playing?
The Chronicle explains she played structural equations, pure mathematics translated into sound. The music was described explicitly as dissonance, not song. It was the geometric sound of the 11-fold current.
11-fold. Why 11? That sounds specific.
It does, doesn't it? Let's speculate a bit based on numerology and classical thought. Order often relies on balanced numbers, 3 for Trinity, 4 for elements direction, 7 for planets days, 12 for zodiac months, representing completion, divine order, the calendar year.
Right? 12 feels complete, stable.
Exactly. 11, mathematically and symbolically, is often seen as asymmetry. It's the number beyond 10, perfection, completion of some systems, or just before 12, divine order. It's the number that remains when the song is supposedly complete. But there's this one extra element sticking out, introducing instability. It can represent transgression, chaos, the path beyond the established order.
So the 11-fold current wasn't just random noise, it was calculated sonic vectors. A specific sound frequency based on the structure of the number 11 designed to introduce asymmetry into the supposedly perfect but flawed cosmic mathematics.
That seems to be the idea. Structured anti-harmony, fired conceptually directly into the void.
And how did this music physically work in the ritual?
The sound waves she generated on the viola da gamba supposedly struck that primal altar rock beneath the hall's main hearth. These notes weren't meant for human ears. They were designed to travel deep beneath the ground, waking the sleeping curse in the earth itself, or activating the geometric sigils on the rock, making the entire house vibrate with this meaning and dread. The music itself secured the final, necessary structural energy for the severance.
So the theoretical work was complete, the fuel was gathered, and the music was the firing mechanism.
Precisely. Engaged and ready. The sheer technical competency, the cold scientific approach described in this fictional or perhaps factual plan is what elevates the Chronicle. She wasn't just a generic witch stirring a cauldron. She was portrayed as an architect of cosmic collapse.
Okay, so all the preparations are complete. The energy from the Scarlet Harvest secured. The geometric dissonance of the 11-fold current vibrating through Aethelred Hall via the viola da gamba. Lysandra approaches the final act. How does the Chronicle describe this moment?
It describes it as a willing, utterly cold denial of her final human self. She's standing before the crypt, the altar rock now exposed in the pit beneath the hearth, a place where, as the text says, light did not reside.
This is the moment of total commitment, then, no turning back.
Absolutely. And the text is really insistent here. This was not sacrifice in the traditional sense of giving up something valuable for a higher cause. It was framed as liberation won at an extravagant price. She was trading the fragile, temporal things, human love, attachment to mortality, even the memory of the Baron, or the faint grief from the stillness of the cradle for what she perceived as infinite blacklight.
The darkness was her lover, as the Outland puts it. The absolute true answer she'd always sought in the marshes, in the house's decay.
Exactly. This was her final, perfect rejection of the world's weak design. In this moment, she supposedly gave her mortal soul and her very name the identity Lysandra Vane, and took the empty throne of whatever dark principality she was aligning with. Lysandra ceased to be. She became, as the source chillingly states, the one she served. Not a servant to it, but a vessel for the chaotic power she had engineered and invoked.
And her state of mind at this point, was she ecstatic, terrified?
Neither, really. The text describes her mind achieving its final, terrifying form. A vessel perfectly suited for the void. The final truth she gained, this comprehension of cosmic nothingness, didn't bring comfort or terror, but absolute madness. Yet a madness that paradoxically made her spirit whole, complete in its negation. She became a prophet of the dark, moving now with the utter calmness of the grave. Her competence was absolute, her purpose single-minded.
Okay, so the final scene. Down in the pit, the altar rock exposed, pulsing with the silent energy of the 11-fold current. What happened next? Was there one last sacrifice?
Yes. The ritual apparently required one last component. A final, perfect counterweight to the complex geometric energy she had amassed through the harvest and the music.
What was it?
The text is somewhat vague, describing it only as a chosen vessel, a soul of simple worth.
Simple worth? Why simple?
The implication seems to be that its simplicity, its lack of complexity or perhaps ambition, provided the perfect clean contrast to her own vast, complex, nihilistic rage, like needing a 0 point to anchor the negative calculation, a final component in the equation.
And then?
She spoke the final words of the anti-gospel, the geometric sacred treason. The act itself was described not as dramatic or prolonged, but sharp, precise, and swiftly done, like closing a circuit. The energy poured out, focused through the rock, amplified by the dissonance, and the source claims definitively the cosmic veil was torn.
Torn, just like that. What was the immediate effect? Explosions, the hall collapsing.
And here's a crucial detail that really subverts typical genre expectations. No, the hall did not explode. It didn't burn down in some predictable, fiery climax. Instead, the physical deed was sealed by a profound, chilling silence. A silence that fell over everything, endorsing the dark name, suggesting that change wasn't superficial destruction but something fundamental, structural, and total. A change in the underlying code of reality, perhaps.
Wow, so no Big Bang, just a change in the operating system. And what was left behind, the aftermath. This is where we get to the physical evidence, right? The enduring relics.
Yes. Lysandra's severance was apparently made complete with a final act of scorn for her own mortal flesh, which was left upon the altar stone as evidence, or perhaps as a seal.
This is Nugget 5. What exactly was left?
Just two specific parts of her. Her severed head remained upon the rock, a terrifying silent sign of the intellect that drove the act, and her left hand lay beside the dagger on the stone.
The head that conceived it, the hand that executed it.
Precisely. Those were the only parts of her mortal shell she claimed as truly known, necessary for the final ritual equation. The rest of her body, her history, her human identity, completely rejected, consumed, or perhaps translated into whatever state she achieved.
Chilling. And the other relic, the instrument.
The instrument of structural chaos, the viola da gamba, stood silent nearby. Its music fulfilled, the 11-fold current drawn and discharged, it became merely a shell of artistry. A beautiful object, now drained of its terrible purpose. A silent witness to the crime, now perhaps beyond the reach of time itself. Its job was done.
And what about the Baron, Lucius Vane, the husband who conveniently left?
Ah, yes, the absent lord. The Chronicle gives him a particularly harsh, almost contemptuous fate. His end was unseen, unrecorded, and deemed utterly unimportant by the narrative. He died fighting for mortal thrones and fragile human ambition in some distant war, his memory utterly destroyed and consumed by the greater night his wife had invoked. His very absence, his preoccupation with petty, mortal concerns, was framed as the crucial gift that guaranteed the spell's success. He wasn't there to interfere.
So his life's purpose, in the end, was just to get out of the way.
According to the Chronicle, yes. And the world outside Aethelred Hall, it continued, the text asserts, believing it was free, not knowing chaos reigned in its totality. Lysandra Vane had supposedly achieved her final, chilling purpose, the installation of a new, chaotic regime, silently governing an unaware reality.
Okay, that's the narrative from the Chronicle itself. Terrifying stuff. But now we need to step back, put on our historian hats for a moment, and address the facts as they supposedly unfolded in the centuries after 1605. If the cosmic veil really was torn, what was the material aftermath? Did anything change tangibly?
Well, according to the source material, both the Chronicle's epilogue and the Scrivener's notes, which seem to draw on later local records, the Vane lineage did somehow continue for nearly 2 more centuries. They kept occupying Aethelred Hall.
So life went on. For a while.
For a while, yes. But the family history became this relentless, tragic pattern. Every successive owner, every heir who inherited the hall, met a suspicious or untimely end. Frequently recorded as sudden suicide, inexplicable bouts of insanity leading to self-destruction, or sometimes unsolved, isolated murders within the estate grounds.
And these deaths, were they linked by anything?
Consistently, yes. They were tied to accounts of immense personal isolation and severe, unexplained psychological distress. It strongly suggests that whatever chaos Lysandra supposedly unleashed was perhaps targeted, maybe specifically at her own bloodline or anyone who assumed command of the hall, forcing them into the same kind of spiritual isolation and despair that she herself had cultivated. A kind of hereditary curse tied to the property and the name.
Beyond the family itself, what about the hall's reputation locally?
If we look at local histories and contemporary accounts cited by the Scrivener from the 18th and 19th centuries, Aethelred Hall was universally considered a place of profound, undeniable, malevolent haunting. These accounts are apparently remarkably consistent over generations.
Consistent in what way? What did people report?
They specifically associate the haunting with those chilling sensory details we discussed earlier. The persistent cold scent of sulfur and iron clinging to the property, even decades, centuries after the supposed ritual, something that couldn't be aired out or cleaned away.
And the sound. Did anyone still hear the music?
Yes, that's the other consistent element. The source is specific. Local whispers described hearing dissonant chords. The faint, persistent echo of the 11-fold current, especially on still nights near the hall. It's as if the building or the ground beneath it was still vibrating with Lysandra's geometric sound, an auditory marker of the cosmic damage.
Okay, so a cursed family, a haunted house emitting bad smells and weird sounds. This must have reached a breaking point eventually.
It did. The building had become too dangerous, the family line too unstable and tragic. The mounting dread, the constant negative influence on the area became so intolerable that it led to our final, crucial historical intervention. what the outline calls the drastic measure taken by the community. And this is nugget number 6.
What was this measure? This seems important because it moves beyond folklore into potential civic action.
It really does. This is a key point because it shifts the evidence, such as it is, from supernatural folklore and family tragedy towards actual civic documentation, or at least strong local historical accounts of it. In the mid-19th century, following a particularly gruesome sequence of events described as the final internal collapse of the Vane family line, maybe the last heir died horribly or went mad, the local town council made an unprecedented and, frankly, economically absurd decision.
What did they do?
They purchased Aethelred Hall, used public funds or raised money somehow, and then they systematically destroyed it.
Destroyed it, not repurposed it, not sold it off.
No, destroyed it utterly. The Chronicle's epilogue and the associated notes suggest that every single stone was pulled down, dismantled. And the entire foundation, including that cursed altar rock, presumably, was covered over, buried, erased from the landscape.
Why? What was their stated motivation?
Starkly simple, according to the source, to physically eradicate the source of the evil that had corrupted the region's history for 2 centuries. They weren't interested in salvaging the materials. They weren't interested in the land value. They wanted the place itself, the nexus of the problem, gone, obliterated.
That's extreme. Why would a council spend that kind of money and effort just to erase an old, albeit creepy, family estate? Demolition on that scale is hugely expensive.
Exactly. This action, if historically accurate, lends enormous weight to the notion that something truly horrific and pervasive, something way beyond just a standard haunting or a family's bad luck, was perceived to have transpired there. It suggests a collective, institutional belief in the active malevolent power of the location itself. They were trying, quite literally, to physically close the cosmic wound Lysandra Vane had supposedly opened, patch the hole in reality.
And yet, even after all that, the debate persists.
Even today, even with the physical site eradicated, the modern academic split remains fundamentally the same. Was Lysandra Vane a real historical figure who somehow achieved cosmic severance? Or is the Chronicle just an extreme, incredibly detailed literary fabrication, maybe a masterpiece of early Gothic horror, built cleverly on local tragedy and the catastrophic failure of a specific noble family line?
And the source material, the Chronicle itself, doesn't give us a definitive answer.
No. It only gives us evidence, within its own narrative framework, of profound, lasting chaos, rooted potentially in the structure of the universe itself. The Hall site today, it's just dense, quiet woodland, unremarkable on the surface, but the local lore, that modern echo, persists.
What does the lore say now?
We are told that on silent, fog-bound nights, if you go close to the thicket where the hall once stood, you can still sometimes hear the soft, cold whispers of Lysandra calling.
Still calling, after all this time.
Apparently. And those whispers, according to the Chronicle's postscript, have successfully lured and destroyed every Vane descendant who dared to inquire too closely about their lost birthright, right up until the line finally died out or vanished sometime after the Hall's destruction.
So if the Chronicle is to be believed, the threat wasn't contained by destroying the Hall. It's eternal.
That's the implication, contained partly in the silent woodland, perhaps anchored there still, but also, alarmingly, contained within the black, geometric words of the manuscript itself, still waiting patiently for the solitary reader in the dark to grant it audience and maybe continue the work.
Right. We have completed our deep dive into the Tenebrous Chronicle of Lysandra Vane. We have gone from the cursed, sinew-bound book itself through the geometric sound of the viola da gamba
To the stillness of the cradle as that horrifying catalyst.
and finally to the total, calculated destruction of Aethelred Hall by civic order and attempt to erase the stain.
We've tried to distill the chilling architecture of this alleged treason. And it really is architectural, isn't it? It wasn't a plan built on momentary passion or any kind of conventional faith, dark or otherwise.
No, it was built on cold, rigorous, blasphemous science and this profound nihilistic logic, finding a perceived structural flaw in creation and exploiting it through cruel equations and calculated violence.
Lysandra Vane, or the figure described, achieved her goal by treating life as concentrated fuel and music as a mathematical vector to induce chaos. The sheer coldness and the intellectual competency of her design. It really does make the Chronicle one of the most compelling and, frankly, terrifying pieces of esoteric knowledge or fiction that we've ever encountered here.
I agree. The central horror of it, for me, isn't really the murder, as grim as that is. It's the core idea that a single person armed with the right forbidden knowledge, the right anti-formula, could actually break reality itself.
And that the only evidence left behind would be this profound silence and this lingering, localized, persistent chaos affecting those connected to it. It's insidious.
So let's end this deep dive, as we always try to, with a final provocative thought. Something that builds on the Chronicle's own final assertion. The text claims right at the end that after the ritual, the world outside Aethelred Hall just continued. It went on, quote, believing it was free, not knowing chaos reigned in its totality.
The truly disturbing thought, that the fundamental operating system changed, but nobody noticed.
Exactly. So if we entertain just for a moment the premise of the Chronicle as true, that the cosmic veil was genuinely torn back in 1605, and that this Baroness of Chaos now somehow commands or influences the human race in silence, well, we have to consider the potential structural implications of that kind of hidden shift.
What would that look like in the real world?
That's the question for you, the listener. If universal order, as we perceive it, is truly a lie, or at least compromised, if chaos, meaninglessness, or that geometric lie now reigns supreme beneath the surface, what modern human concepts, something built entirely on structure, logic, predictability, maybe something we rely on every single day to maintain civilization, what would be the first thing to start dissolving? What would be the first system to fray under the silent, superior command of Lysandra Vane's anti-logic?
What crumbles first when the foundations are secretly gone?
Think about that as you try to reconcile the integrity of the universe you experience with the chilling possibility of the geometric lie of that seven-pointed star. Thank you for joining the Deep Dive.